Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, the Raiders made no moves at the trade deadline. I'll talk about why that was. Not really a surprise to me. Plus, Lincoln Kennedy had his normal Tuesday hit on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, on Raider Nation Radio 920. You'll hear some of that conversation. Your calls and texts will close out the show. It's all coming up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 2nd, 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms. And off top, I want to apologize for getting the show out a little bit later than normal. I'm actually in Arizona right now, Tucson, Arizona. Lil Q had a game against the University of Arizona, a little bit of basketball action, and it was a lot of fun, but it ran a little bit late. So by the time I got back to the hotel, it was a little late, so wasn't able to knock out the show at my normal time. But here we are, still going to have a show, just getting up a little bit later than normal. Lil Q's team lost. Of course, he plays for Western Oregon, but that's a D2 school going up against the 17th ranked team in the country. And they did a hell of a showing, man. So I was very proud of the young man. Took him out to dinner. Myself and the wife took him out to dinner after the game. Got to talk to his coaches for a little while. So had a lot of fun. Now back on the bird and headed to Las Vegas to get back to doing what we normally do. But again, just very excited to have the opportunity to go out to Tucson, hang out, watch Lil Q play in action, little college ball on the big stage. So anyway, as I said, apologize for getting the show up a little bit later than normal. Today's episode of the Locked On Raiders podcast presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. Now, the trade deadline came and went. And Raider Nation, I'll tell you right now, the only thing I was concerned about when it came to the trade deadline was, were the Raiders going to move Josh Jacobs? And look, hear me out before you get up in arms, because I talked about this on my radio show on Tuesday when the trade deadline had passed, and a lot of folks thought, Q, why are you trying to get rid of Josh Jacobs? I wasn't. I was not trying to get rid of Josh Jacobs, but I know that there was a lot of teams, including the Rams. I know there were the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, were all looking for running backs. And the Raiders are sitting there at 2-5, and I saw some players getting dealt across the league. There was 10 trades made before the trade deadline on Tuesday, and the teams that were trading these players away were getting some really good draft capital in return. So I thought for a second that maybe the Raiders would get a little bit crazy, a little bit squirrely, and say, you know what, we'll go ahead and trade Josh Jacobs and get a second in return and have a little bit more draft capital, especially if they plan on letting him walk at the end of the season anyway. Now, I'm not saying that I heard that anywhere. It just was one of those things that I was concerned about. So as all these trades kept popping up on Tuesday, I kept thinking, please don't let me see Josh Jacobs' name. And luckily, it did not happen. And, there's a lot of folks that hit me up on my radio show and was like, you know what, Q, they should have traded him because they're going to let him walk for nothing anyway, which is not necessarily true. You can get a compensatory pick, and he was a former first-round pick. Obviously, he's put in a lot of really good seasons with the Silver and Black, and looks like he's going to have a really big season as well. So still could end up picking up a compensatory pick if they decide not to renew his contract. But at the same time, they could decide to bring him back as well on a 1 or 2 year deal. So there's a lot up in the air. I'm just glad it didn't happen, that the Raiders didn't move on from Josh Jacobs. Now, I thought maybe they would try to get from under Chandler Jones just because he's severely underperformed, but clearly there was no teams that wanted to take him on. And I'm not saying that they even tried to move him, but that would have been the guy that I tried to move on from, was Chandler Jones. Gave him a lot of money to go in and be a bookend across from Max Crosby, and it just has not worked out. Matter of fact, Vinny Bonsignore, my tag team partner, of course, he's on Raider Nation Radio 920 with me as well. He's on the Morning Tailgate Show, and he works for the RJ. Does a really good job as being the Raiders beat writer. He tweeted out, no deals came to fruition for the Raiders today. They had various discussions, but nothing was consummated. Again, that was from Vinny Bonsignore. Put that on Twitter, and I talked to him on my radio show later on, and I said, hey, no deals happened. I didn't think that the Raiders were going to bring in any talent. That's what a lot of folks were saying. A lot of Raider Nation was saying, how come they didn't make any moves? How come they didn't bring anybody in? How come they didn't go look at, a couple of these guys that were traded, made trades with other teams? And I just didn't think that they were in position to do that. The reason I say that is because sitting there at 2-5, and after the letdown that was what happened on Sunday against the Saints, I just kind of felt like, you know what? They're not really in a position to give away draft capital to get a guy or two, just because I don't think that they're a guy or two away. The expectations I have for the team heading into the season and what I thought they may need at the trade deadline, after the game on Sunday, it kind of gave me a different feeling. Like, you know what? Maybe I was a little bit too far ahead of myself. Maybe they weren't quite as good as what I thought. I did learn something at the trade deadline, though. I didn't realize that you could trade for a suspended player like the Jaguars did. They traded for Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver from the Falcons that's been suspended all year and is going to have to continue to be suspended the rest of the year for gambling. And actually, it's ironic, betting on the Falcons-Jaguars game. Now he's going to be a member of the Jaguars. I think it was a really good trade, smart trade by the Jaguars. They're not a team that's looking like that they're going to make any noise this season. Matter of fact, the next team that the Raiders are going to play. But by the time Calvin Ridley comes back, I mean, he'll be wide receiver number one for him. They'll go and combine him with Christian Kirk. Zay Jones, we all know he's there as well. They're putting some weapons around Trevor Lawrence, and again, they're really looking ahead to the to next year. So I think it was a smart move by the Jaguars to go and get a Calvin Ridley, just so they know that they have that guy in the fold when they're ready to make things happen next year. And of course, they'll have plenty of cap space. They'll have plenty of draft picks that they can go and add to the weaponry as well. But the funny thing about it, I tweeted out and I was like, wow, trading for a suspended player. I had no idea, Raider Nation. I had no idea that you could trade for a suspended player, but the Jaguars did it. And so there you go. So the Raiders didn't make any moves. And the one thing I'll say, there's two players that I'm looking at. I want you to keep these names and just kind of hold on to them and see what happens. Again, I don't know if the Raiders are going to be interested. I don't know if they are interested at all, but there's two names that I'm interested in. One is Sidney Jones. He was waived by the Seahawks. He was the cornerback that I had talked about when I was talking about the Raiders going out and making trades before they lost to the Saints and saying maybe go and give the Seahawks a 6th-round pick, a 7th-round pick in return for Sidney Jones, a guy who was a 2nd-round pick in 2017 coming out of Washington. He had tore his Achilles, so that's why he dropped. He would have been a surefire 1st-round pick, probably a top 10 pick, but tore his Achilles. And I know he's played with multiple teams, been in Philadelphia, was with the Seahawks, had a concussion earlier this year. That's why he lost his starting spot and hasn't been able to get it back because they have some young dudes that are filling that void. I'm not saying Sidney Jones is going to cure all for the Raiders in their defense, but I am saying Sidney Jones could help provide some depth because right now they have Rock Ya-Sin, Nate Hobbs. We know he's out for at least 4 weeks. They have Sam Webb, the youngster, right? But they don't really have anyone that you think is going to be that dude. Amik Robertson, I mean, he's there. He's doing a good job, doing the best he can. But again, there's not anyone that you really think could be the dude. And I'm not saying Sidney Jones is going to be the dude, but he could at least help provide a little something. So I would have no problem since he's been waived by the Seahawks. I would have no problem with the Raiders making a claim for him. I think that he makes a lot of sense. Jordan Schultz from The Score, he does a really good job in covering sports for a very long time. The NBA, the NFL, actually sent me a direct message and said, Sidney Jones waived by the Seahawks. I like him for you guys. And it's so funny. People always say that, you guys, because I cover the Raiders, obviously, and, do a show on Raider Nation Radio 920. But he said that to me, and I said, you know what? I think he's a good fit as well. And he said, look for him and potentially the Raiders. So that's a guy right there. And also another name that's intriguing to me. And it's just intriguing to me because I know that he's a defensive tackle, and I know that the Raiders need defensive tackle help. That's Tristan Hill. He was waived by the Cowboys. He was a former 2nd-round pick in 2019. And it's funny, when it comes to Tristan Hill, he was actually waived because the Cowboys went out and made a move for Jonathan Hankins, and now the defensive tackle room was too full. So the Cowboys go and trade with the Raiders and go and bring in Jonathan Hankins, a defensive tackle, and then they waive a defensive tackle on Tristan Hill. And the thing about him, even when he was drafted, he had a reputation of being lazy. And so I'm not saying that this guy is going to be the end-all, be-all, but I wouldn't have a problem if the Raiders brought in Sidney Jones and Tristan Hill, saw what they can do. If they cut it, great. If they don't, well, that's fine too. You just picked them up off waivers, not a big deal. You could turn around and release them if you want to. But those are two names that I would definitely be intrigued by and definitely pay attention to see what happens throughout the waiver wire. We'll find out something probably today, later on today, or maybe early tomorrow at the latest. So, no moves for the Raiders before the trade deadline. Not that they weren't in conversations with people, but nothing ended up happening, and I'm okay with that. I think they need to go ahead and keep their draft capital, keep it in their pocket, and be good to go for next year. No, and I don't know how this year is gonna shake out. Don't know where they're going to be picking, but I'd rather at this point just hold on to the draft capital and use it for the upcoming draft. real quick, I wanted to let you hear a little bit of sound from defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. He met with the Raiders, or he met with the media on Tuesday by way of Zoom because they're in Sarasota, Florida, and so that's how they're meeting. The coaches and players are meeting with the media right now is by way of Zoom, and so he met with them and just wanted to let you hear a couple sound bites. And one was about the consistent or lack of consistent pressure that the Raiders defensive line has been getting on the quarterback. We know Max Crosby's been doing what he does, but Chandler Jones has half a sack, right? Cleve Farrell has half a sack. Denzel Perryman has a sack. Nate Hobbs has a sack. There's not very much pressure been getting on the quarterbacks. On Sunday, Andy Dalton didn't get hit at all. Derek Carr got hit 9 times. Andy Dalton, 0. So here's Patrick Graham talking about trying to create consistent pressure on the quarterback and why he thinks it hasn't happened just yet.
Well, it always starts with me, in terms of just got to figure out a way to coach it better and just put them in better spots to create some more negative plays in terms of the pass rush and getting some consistent pressure. And, based on the game and how the flow of the game goes, I think they had 32 carries last week, but again, no excuses. We just got to figure it out just to find a way to be more consistent in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. But it starts with me, and that's what we're working on today, heading into the game versus Jacksonville. They got a quarterback, young quarterback who can throw the ball all around the field. They have some unique weapons on the perimeter in terms of the passing game. And so, that the process starts there. And they got a pretty big and athletic O-line that, presents some challenges in terms of getting to the quarterback. So we're just going to stay, diligent there and just working hard today and for the rest of the week to try to figure out a plan.
So obviously that's a big deal right there. It's getting pressure on the quarterback. You've got to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. If you can't, it's going to be a problem moving forward, right? Any quarterback will pick you apart if they're not getting pressure. And then on top of that, the Raiders don't have a solid secondary. So you're not getting pressure and your secondary is not solid. That's a recipe for disaster. So that's got to get fixed quick, fast, and in a hurry. Final soundbite that I want you to hear from defensive coordinator Patrick Graham is, if it's time to start giving some of the younger guys some reps, maybe bring in a Tayshaun Bauer more, maybe bring in a Malcolm Kuntz, maybe a guy like a Sam Webb, some of these guys that we haven't really seen too much because, well, the veterans aren't quite getting it done. So here's Patrick Graham on the process that it takes for some of these younger guys or any guys to get some reps.
All opportunities are earned on the practice field. And so, again, whether it's age, youth, or experience, is just really trying to put together what we think is best for that week. But the guys that will be out on the field are the guys that we say are that earned it in practice, and that's really the process that we go through here. So again, I can't speak for when we got here, the roster. Again, we got good players here, and we got to figure out a way to make sure that they're. I got to make sure I'm putting them in the right spots, and obviously have to execute at a higher level, and it all starts with me.
The one thing I know for a fact from this regime since they've taken over, and this is from the front office, from Dave Ziegler to head coach Josh McDaniels to defensive coordinator Patrick Graham to offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi. It doesn't matter what coach you talk to, and it doesn't matter if you talk to the GM who, oh, by the way, he's going to be talking with the media later on this morning. So depending on what time you're listening to this, Dave Ziegler is going to be talking sooner rather than later. But you earn your practice. You earn your time on the field by what you do in practice. So if these guys aren't getting on the field, it's because they're not getting it done in practice. That's how these guys get on the field. And that's what this coaching staff and this front office, they judge everything off of what you do in practice. If you're getting after it in practice, you got a good chance of getting after it in the game and getting on the field. If you're not getting after it in practice, it's simple. You're not going to get on the field during a game. It just won't happen. So if these young guys want to get on the field, then they better be the hardest working cats out there in practice at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center in Sarasota, Florida, if they're preparing for the Jaguars or wherever the case may be. Get after it, and get after it some more in practice, and you'll have an opportunity to get onto the field. So that's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, want you to hear from Lincoln Kennedy. He joins my radio show every single Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. On Tuesdays, he talks about the prior game. On Thursdays, he talks about the game coming up. So we talked to him on Tuesday about the Saints game and what the world happened. On Thursday, we'll talk about the Jaguars, what he thinks needs to happen for the Raiders moving forward. So you'll hear some of that conversation that we had with Lincoln Kennedy coming up in segment 2 after I tell you about Simply Safe. And if you thought about securing your home with home security, you've been putting it off, well, you'll want to listen. You'll want to listen right now. All Locked On Raider podcast listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Not at all. And look, right now, I'm out of town. So guess what? My home could be at risk. And Simply Safe could come through like the first of the month. And they have so much great technology. They have security cameras. They have high-tech HD view where you can monitor it on your phone. There's so many different things that you can do to make sure that your home is always secure. And of course, they can alert to the police. They find out if it's a real issue. If an alarm's going off, they're not going to send the police out because of a false alarm. What they'll do is they'll ensure that, okay, there is something going on. We can go ahead and alert the proper authorities. So Simply Safe has you covered 24/7. They got the monitoring agent, Simply Safe tech support staff. They've got everything that you need. In emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe. They capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real. You can get priority police response. It is really, really cool. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I would recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedon. This is your biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. At simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want you to hear from Lincoln Kennedy, former Raider offensive lineman, multiple-time Pro Bowler, is part of the Raiders radio broadcast network right now, and he's a guy that's very prideful when it comes to the silver and black. He always wants the best for the team. He always wants the best for the organization. He said multiple times to me that, he owes a lot to Al Davis and the organization, so he is a Raider through and through. I mean, when it's Kansas City Chiefs week, he always jokes about, hey, maybe I can get my old jersey back one more time and suit up against the Chiefs, because that's just how much pride he has in the silver and black. Well, of course, he was not happy when we got to talk to him on Tuesday about what he saw on Sunday against the Saints from the Raiders, because he expected a whole lot more as the Raiders went to the Big Easy, not guaranteeing that it was going to be a victory, but thought that they were going to be very competitive, and they weren't. So we started off the conversation talking about his biggest takeaway from what he saw the Raiders do as a team on Sunday.
It wasn't a team effort. It was the fact that the Raiders weren't there, and it's just heartening, Q, when you think about it, because we've seen this team make such strides this season and offer such promise, not to show up when they come to the Superdome, not to show up when they come to New Orleans. It's really disheartening.
What does that mean about the week of preparation? Does that mean it was just a bad week?
I guess you can chalk it up to that. Look. I've had some ass whoopings before. I've lost to some bad losses when I played. And you can sit there and say that you didn't show up or you didn't come. But you think about the season for the Raiders, the offer of such promise, what we thought we had, especially when you looked at on paper, what they were, not to show up is really disheartening. But I commend Josh McDaniels for coming out and accepting responsibility for a loss in this press conference and saying, this is my fault, this is on me, because he's right. It's not just on the coaches, it's on the players. Coaches coach, players play. But the thing is that the coaches didn't have these guys ready to play for whatever reason. And I don't know. Because I don't know the system that's in that locker room. I don't know who gets these guys riled up. I don't know what gets these guys riled up. You would think as professionals, you're ready to play every weekend, right? And that's not true. That's not true. I've been in situations like that, but that's not true. And it's disappointing. It's really disappointing. And hopefully this week in Florida, we'll get these guys together so they can show us what they're capable of against Jacksonville, which is another game they should win.
I wanted to ask you about the offensive line and what you saw from defensive-minded head coach Dennis Allen, what he did to really eliminate the Raiders' offensive line, because they look like almost Swiss cheese on Sunday.
Well, look, here's the thing. This is something I want to reiterate because I've talked about it extensively so far. We knew coming into the game the offensive line was not as stable and it was porous. We knew that. The run game kind of helped the stability of the offensive line, but here's the thing. The Saints loaded the box. They brought one more than the offensive line can block. And when they did that, they made the offensive line look even worse than it has been before. The offensive line has had issues protecting Derek Carr. With the ability to run the football, we gave praise to the offensive line, and we said the offensive line is playing better. That's not very good pass protection. They haven't been all year. We knew that.
Right.
The thing is with the offensive line is that in the offense, we knew that teams with a capable front four can address pressure, but you needed that balance. So what we saw from the Saints, they've got a front four that they don't have to bring a blitz. So they have that front four that can address pressure. They took away the would-be receivers for the offense, and then forced Derek to hold on the ball a little bit longer, which caused hits, which caused sacks. That is what it is. So, going forward, and that's what's just so disheartening for me, Q, because you know what you have. You know that teams are going to take away Devontae Adams. They're going to double cover. You don't have Darren Waller. They're going to double cover Devontae Adams. If you have a structured quarterback like Derek Carr, who says, okay, this play is going to go to Hunter Renfrow, this play is supposed to go to Devontae Adams, and he doesn't have that option open, and he holds onto the ball, you're going to take hits.
Right.
So you got to make adjustments.
Right. Yep.
You got to make adjustments. You have to find a way to develop a plan for Matt Hollins or whomever else is out there that teams aren't expecting, that aren't double covering, because you don't have Darren Waller, because you don't have those Josh Jacobs. You don't have that. You got to find a way. You can't be as predictable as the Raiders were, because Dennis Allen took away all your options collectively, because we know what the routine is. We know what's to be expected. We know what they're looking for. And you've got a systematic quarterback who's going to go out there and say, okay, this play is to go to Devontae Adams. Oh, he's not open. Oh, what am I supposed to do? Oh, sack, hit. Oh, ouch. Oh, this play is supposed to go to screen. Well, they took the screen again. What am I supposed to do? Oh, you got to do better than that. That's coaches coach, and players play.
A question that I was asked on Twitter that I want to pass along to you is, why do the Raiders ditch the run game so early in the game once they get behind?
It wasn't a ditch the run game. First of all, you also have to play to what the tune of the game is. You're down a certain number of points. It's not you ditch the run game. They took the running game away. When the Raiders bring in a fullback or an extra tight end, teams are going to match up. They're going to load up the box. If you don't have a plan and how to address that, then that's not an option. When the run game goes away, or when you can't get effective runs, you get behind the sticks. Second down and long, third down and long. You got to try to pass to throw the ball. Well, now the teams know that you got to pass to throw the ball. They're sitting on your would-be receivers. There's no option there.
No doubt about it. Again, Lincoln Kennedy is our guest here on Raider Nation Radio 920. So, Lincoln, earlier you said that, you don't really know what to expect from this team. Obviously, they're trying to have a bounce back this week against Jacksonville, a game that I believe they should win. But, again, you can't just count a should win. They've got to go out there and actually get the victory. What do you want to see from this team from here on out the rest of this season?
I would – kind of a loaded question, Q, but I'll say this.
Okay.
To try to put it all again. I would hope that this team becomes a team.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. There are individual efforts across the board. There are individuals that we've pointed out we saw star potential throughout the season so far. The season's not lost to me, because if they go on a run, they could probably resurrect this season. I know it's a high task to ask, and of course the Raider Nation is sitting there like, whatever. No, there's potential there, but this team needs to play as a team, not individuals.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think you hit it right on the head. There's individual talent on this team, but they need to actually, like you said, go out and play like a team. That makes all the sense in the world. It really does.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
doubt. It also comes down to the fact that the coaches need to coach this team. You can't coach individuals. You can't coach, a couple of people and think that it's going to come together. For example, Josh McDaniels and the collective efforts on this offense. We need to create a team effort. So when they see somebody who's not playing well or someone who's taken out of the game, an individual is taken out of the game, I need to find a way to get more out of this team. It comes to play calling. It comes to execution. It comes to all of that, man. It's a systematic sort of a waterfall, if you will. It comes from the top and it flows to the bottom, and it has to happen from execution. It has to happen from play calling, scheme. All of that has to come together because you create individuals to be better as a team, and that's what we haven't seen. And it's definitely what we've been seeing this past Sunday. That's why they got their ass kicked.
There you go, right there. About nice 8.5 minutes of our chunk of our conversation with Lincoln Kennedy. Again, we talk to him every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Raider Nation Radio 920. And he always brings the truth serum. So I really always can appreciate that. And one of his biggest takeaways is that the Raiders don't play like a team right now. They're a bunch of individuals. The rest of the way throughout the course of the season, what he wants to see is them play like a team. You can have a lot of talent, but if you don't play the ultimate team game like a team, you're not going to win a lot. And, well, right now the Raiders are sitting there at 2-5 with the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up next. Speaking of coming up next, we got your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We got that coming up. But before we do any of that, I want to tell you about the title sponsor of today's show, which is Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is pretty cool. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less in their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. They offer projections on any sport that you watch, including NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, golf, college football, men's college football. I mean, man, everything that's going on and then some, right? I mean, soccer, esports, NASCAR, tennis, boxing, MMA, everything you can imagine they have. Entries could be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. What you need to do right now, download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. You deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, guess what? PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget, use the promo code LOCKEDON to sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Nate. He's calling about the Raiders not making any moves at the trade deadline and what that means to him. Here he is, Nate.
Q. How you doing? It's your boy Nate. Just wanted to say one thing. Well, actually 2 things. The Raiders not trading for nobody. Not making any moves. Says 1 of 2 things. Number 1, they know they ain't going nowhere fast. Which is why they're holding back. They ain't going to try to make any moves right now. Wait for the off season. Potentially make a few moves then. Or 2, everybody really believes in what they have, core guys. Moving forward, they think that they can really get it done with who they have. And if I'm being an optimist, I'm going to go with number 2. Maybe I'm biased, I'm a Raider fan, but I also believe in this group of guys. I believe in the coaching staff. It just hasn't been going our way, you know what? And it is what it is at this point. Well, much love. That's all for me. Hopefully we can turn this thing around.
Nate Dogg, thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, going back to what I said in segment number 1, I believe that loss on Sunday really took them out of the buyer's market. Really, only thing I thought that they could do is become sellers, and they didn't do that either. They didn't become sellers at the trade deadline, which I'm fine with. I wasn't pounding the table saying that they had to. I was just hoping that they were going to make sure they held on to Josh Jacobs, which they did. So I'm good. If they had moved on from Chandler Jones, that would have been fine, but they didn't. So cool, no problem. Just roll with you got, and if they could pick up maybe Sidney Jones, pick up Tristan Hill off waivers, great. Then that's some added talent right there, and you still keep your draft capital in your pocket. I am good with that, no doubt. But definitely appreciate your call, my man. Up next, we got a text from Caden from Reno. It says, yo, Q, it's Caden from Reno. For some reason, all season, it's been 1 step forward, 3 steps back. It's really disappointing to see. There's also no leadership from the players. One of the guys needs to step up. Maybe getting shut out woke them up, and Then they come out flying around in Jacksonville. Q, keep doing what you're doing. Love it. That is from Caden in Reno. And thank you so much for the text, my man. And yeah, it's funny. I don't want to overreact to that one loss, but it was so bad that I almost feel like I have to. Right? It's like if I just say, oh, well, that was just a bad day at the office, then it's like I'm underplaying it. And it was really bad, right? I mean, and I honestly am hoping that it was just a bad day at the office. I'm hoping that they just couldn't get their stuff together and could never get out of their own way and just boom, and maybe that'll be the last time that we ever see that. Each year we always see at least one game where it's a big stinker, right? Well, that was it. The only problem is I think it was magnified because this is what everyone's been saying is the stretch of the season where they can get back into the thick of things. And, you see that game against the Saints, and if they won it, they're at 3-4, and then they go to Jacksonville and they go 4-4, and then they come back home, and you feel pretty good about their chances, especially with the AFC being a mess right now. But man, after that beatdown, it's hard to get on that train and say, yeah, everything's going to be all right. But we'll see. They got another game on Sunday against the Jaguars, another very winnable game. We'll see what they do. Thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a call from Derek in New York. He's calling to talk about the loss and how much the illness going around the locker room might have played a part. Here he is, Derek in New York.
Hey, Q, it's Derek from New York. Long-time listener, never called in before. Sent a couple text messages, but yeah, first-time caller. Anyway, how much of that Saints loss do you think is compiled with the flu and all that? I mean, I'm not giving up on them. I still think they can pull 500 in this stretch. It's debatable after watching that lethargic effort we just saw, but, it's kind of I love them regardless. It's kind of like when your child shows up and has all F's on their report card. You're a little disappointed in them, but they're still your child. You love them. Anyways, curious what your thoughts are. Take care.
There he goes. That's Derek in New York. Thank you so much for that call, my man. I definitely appreciate you. And, man, I think about that as well as I've been thinking about that loss and how it happened, right? And so I've had multiple people on my radio show, and I've asked them, how much do you think that illness that was going around the locker room? Because, I mean, they did look lifeless, right? They just looked like they just had no energy. They had nothing, no want to. I know Davante Adams had missed multiple practices, and it just seemed like something was not right. And maybe they're trying to downplay how serious that illness really was. I don't know. I really don't. My man, Vegas Jess, my really good friend Vegas Jess told me immediately after the game, we went out to eat with him and his family, and he said, yeah, I just chalk it up to a bad game, and Davante Adams was clearly sick, and other guys looked like they were sick as well. And so, it's almost one of those things. It's like, yeah, they had that illness. And again, I don't want to use that as an excuse because they still got to go out there and operate and perform. And who hasn't gone to work sick a few times? But I don't know. I can't just sit here in good consciousness and say, yeah, that was the problem. But I also at the same time can't say that it wasn't a factor, if that makes sense. So thank you so much, Derek, for that call. I do appreciate you. Got a couple more before we wrap up today's show. Got a text from Matt in Provo, Utah. It says, hey, Q, I'm Matt from Provo, Utah. It's my first time texting in. But anyway, I want to get to the point about this text. After the Saints game, I'm starting to dislike Derek Carr and his ability. I mean, yeah, he's an amazing dude, but I just don't think he's the dude for us. So what do you think if we got Bryce Young, Hendon Hooker, or Jaren Hall in the draft? Also, if Josh McDaniels doesn't end up working out in the next year or two, what would you think about Eric Bieniemy as our head coach? He knows how to win, and it could help us possibly finally beat the Chiefs because he knows their system. Thanks. That's Matt in Provo, Utah. And this is my thing when it comes to Derek Carr. I think he can win with this team. I really do. I think that he's good enough to get it done. I also do believe, as I mentioned on the show on Tuesday, that the Raiders are going to start with the succession plan. Like, who's going to be the next guy? I honestly think that the old regime was going to do that. And I know people get tired of me bringing up Jalen Hurts, but I do think that they were going to draft him if he had been available. It's just Philadelphia went and got him ahead of time. I think that they do draft a person. I don't know how they're going to, what position they're going to be in to draft a quarterback this year. One of the many quarterbacks that are coming back are out, like you mentioned, like Young, Hooker, Hall, whatever the case may be. If they draft that high, I can see them making that move and just saying, okay, when he's ready, then we'll put him in, not force him into action immediately. I do think that that's going to happen this year, one way or the other. They're going to draft a quarterback. That's just my gut feeling. And I do still, like I said, think that Derek Carr can get it done. I think that he's a good enough quarterback. He just had a really bad game on Sunday against the Saints. So thank you for that text, my man. I appreciate you. And don't let that be the last text, all right? Thanks so much. Next up, we got a call from Alex in San Diego, and we only got one more text after that. He's calling in to talk about a call he heard on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, from Monday, and it really ran him hot. Plus, he talks about the football side of things as it pertains to Derek Carr. Here he is, Alex in San Diego.
Q, it's Alex from San Diego. Still, I guess you could say, hardcore anger on a Tuesday. But I was just catching up on Unnecessary Roughness' Monday edition, and I think I've stated it before. In fact, I know I've stated it before, that some of these regulars that are calling in, they just don't need to be calling in anymore. Because, yeah, that was a foul phone call yesterday from an individual I like to think he's hardcore, and you know who I'm talking about. But bringing up someone's death. Raider Nation needs to take a chill pill, a major one. This is ridiculous. It's a damn game, and our team is playing like crap right now. But I just wanted to get that off my chest too, because that was really bothersome. I don't know where some of these people. I don't care if you're a fan. I've been a fan since 1976, and that is absolutely ridiculous. Some of the fans that Raider Nation has now, even if I don't even think they are fans. Go cheer for somebody else. You're gonna have that kind of attitude every time when your team just loses. Hey, deal with it. I sported my Raider gear the next day because I'll be a fan forever. But onto the football side of stuff. You know, Derek may not be the screamer that certain quarterbacks are on the sideline to get the team fired up, but maybe he needs to step outside of his element a little bit and get something going as far as that end. Josh Jacobs does deserve a captain's badge on his jersey, and they just need to flat out go out and kick the dog snot out of the Jaguars. Anyway, Q, I listened to obviously this podcast. I listened to Unnecessary Roughness. I listened to JT. Listened to the Morning Tailgate. And yeah, the nation's hurting, but yeah, there's another day that we got lucky enough to wake up to. I know you won't dwell on that guy's phone call too long, but that guy needs to stop calling. Period. So anyway, have a good one, Q, and we'll listen on the next round. Have a good day. Just win, baby.
Thanks, Alex, for the call. I appreciate you. And to the point, a hardcore Raider call about the tragic passing of Tina Tintor. He did, to his credit, send me a DM on Twitter apologizing for saying that, said his emotions got the best of him. Now, that doesn't make it right, but at least he did understand that was out of line, and he apologized for it. As far as Derek Carr goes, he's never going to be that screamer or that angry guy that, allows his emotions to be shown. He's not going to be Tom Brady, who's running up and down the sideline, screaming at his team, screaming at his offensive line. Those are the kind of guys I like. Those are right up my alley. I don't care if you're one of those guys and you work with me and I'm having a bad show and you start yelling at me because we're having a bad show together. Cool. At least I know you care, because I'm going to do the same thing, right? My man Damon always rolls his eyes when I say that, because he knows, right? If the show's going bad, I'll let it be known. Like, hey, man, we got to get our stuff together. And I might not say it in those words, but we got to do it, because this is what we do. We're supposed to be professionals. Let's, get our head out of our backside and let's get it done. That's just me. So I can appreciate guys like that. But Derek Carr, he's not that dude. That's the kind of dude. That's even the kind of coach that I prefer. But I get it. That's not what it is these days. And more times than not, that doesn't work anymore. And players don't really react to that. But, me as a 45-year-old going on 46, that's what I know. And that's what I can appreciate. But Derek Carr is just never going to be that guy. He's going to, try to take all the blame, and he's going to do everything he can for his team. And, he's going to try to pump them up, but he's not going to pump them up in a way where he's yelling, getting fired up, grabbing them by their face mask. He's not Rich Gannon. He's not going to be that dude. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Final text of the show comes from Raider Critique in Killeen, Texas, my old stomping grounds. Used to spend some time out there in Killeen at Leo Buckley Stadium. Little Thursday night football action, little Texas high school football. But let's get to the text. He says, this is Raider Critique in Killeen, Texas. Love everything that you do, Q. I really wish I was understanding what was going on in the field. From playoff team last season to absolute dumpster fire this season. Raider Nation can't catch a break. With all the valuable prospects at quarterback coming up in the draft, I think it's time that we address the quarterback position. I've been a pure Carr stan all of his career, and I can't stomach any more of the non-leadership coming from the quarterback position. We never see him firing up the guys on the sideline, and for our leader to be so abysmal is a tall tale sign of which way we need to go. I'm not a firm believer in our coach. He was a whelp in Denver, and he's looking like a whelp here as well. When you have a roster this full of talent, you can't afford to go 2-5, also being blown out by the league's worst defense. Thank you, Q. Keep up the good work, and I can't wait for your appearance on the Hardcore Raider Nation podcast as the Raider Critique, and I'm out. There you go. Raider Critique right there from the Hardcore Raider Nation podcast, hitting us up, talking about what we just talked about in the last call, which is Derek Carr and him not being fired up on the sideline. And again, he's not that guy. I do believe that the Raiders are going to address the quarterback position, and they'll try to groom someone along, and when they're ready, they'll go ahead and pass the baton on. Look, the contract extension that they gave Derek Carr, one, if they want to, they can get out of it after this year if they want. I don't think that they will, but they really can, and it's only a 3-year extension, so I don't think that you'll see another Derek Carr contract extension with the Silver and Black. I believe that unless all of a sudden he just hits fire and starts winning a ton of games, but I really believe this will probably be his last contract with the Silver and Black. At some point, this new regime who did not draft Derek Carr will eventually move on from Derek Carr. That's just my gut feeling. But that's all I got for you on today's show. Again, I apologize for getting the show up a little bit late. I'm still in Tucson, Arizona. Myself and the wife will be catching our flight around 6 o'clock this morning. Be back in Las Vegas around 7:30. So definitely appreciate you for always tuning into the show, making it your very first listen of the day each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, and still working out the kinks that we have when it comes to YouTube. And my man Ari is working the magic behind the scenes, trying to get it going. And again, I do appreciate all the different subscriptions, all the people that have subscribed to the Locked On Raiders podcast YouTube page already. It's blowing up like overnight, which is incredible. Didn't think that that would ever happen, but it has. So thank you so much for that support. I do appreciate you. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, we'll have more calls and texts. Oh, wait, tomorrow is Thursday, so we'll have the crossover edition. I'll be talking to my man Amp. That's right. My guy Anthony Wiggins from host of Locked On Jaguars. We'll be talking about that game, breaking it down. We'll be talking about the biggest storylines, the biggest matchups, and how the game flow should go. If the Jaguars are going to win, this is going to happen. If the Raiders are going to win, this is going to happen. We'll have the crossover edition, one of the favorite shows of the week. We'll do that tomorrow. So Raider Nation, make sure you tune in for that. Should be a lot of fun. Amp Wiggs is a good dude, real good dude there covering the Jaguars. So I look forward to that conversation. Till then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family, and most importantly, as always, just win, baby.